Hello, everyone. This is another edition of Going Live with Global Learning. My name is Derek Benish. I'm the Associate Dean in Global Learning at Kirkwood. It is a middle of November, bright but overcast day. Today I'm joined by my colleague, Elizabeth O'Brien, who is going to talk to us about her experience in Spain. So, Elizabeth, maybe if you want to say a little bit more about yourself, and then let's talk about your experience in Spain.
Yeah, happy to be here. My name's Elizabeth O'Brien, and I work at Kirkwood in the Global Learning Department. But before I joined Kirkwood, I actually was fortunate enough to live in Northwest Spain. During that time, it was back in 2015, so it's been 10 years. That's actually really sad. But for 3 years, I lived in the region that's called Galicia, and I was an English teacher. And so there's this really cool program between the Ministry of Education and Culture in Spain and different governments around the world that bring native English speakers. And I think now they have some other languages they focus on too, to come into the public schools and act as language assistants, so helping students learn more conversational skills. So after college, I did that for a year, and it was only supposed to be 1 year, and famous last words. I ended up just renewing my contract for a few years because it just was a life-changing opportunity, and I couldn't imagine ending. So yeah, that's a little bit about me.
Perfect. So for those of us who maybe are more used to Midwest weather or the kind of the feel of the Midwest, what is the weather of that part of Spain, and what is the feel of that part of Spain?
Yeah, that is a good question. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the differences of Spain. So when we think of Spain, or at least this is how I thought about that, and I know a lot of my peers felt the same way. We're thinking bright sun, warm weather, heat. It's kind of desert-like, delicious food, lots of live music, a lot of Spanish guitar, flamenco music, and that's the case in southern Spain. So if you're familiar with Sevilla or Granada, you find that more typical Andalusian Spanish culture. But the region I was in Northwest, so right on top of Portugal. And they call it the Ireland of Spain because it's very lush, very green, rains about 300 days of the year. In that part of Spain, they actually speak a different language called Gallego or Galician. And this is a true testament to the culture and the weather. They have over 100 different ways to say rain because there are so many different types of rain. So rain is a big part of their daily life. You go out, you enjoy the rain, everything happens in the rain, and that's just part of the way life is. And so actually when I moved back to the United States, I'd been in Spain so long that I loved the rain. And so I would get really excited when Iowa would say, oh, we're getting like a rain day today. And I'm like, yes, finally, a day to enjoy and stay at home or to go out and just enjoy the mist. But the rain's different. It doesn't really rain all day. It storms here. It's intense, and it's not something that you enjoy. So that was a difference for me, just learning to love the rain.
So the type of rain you're talking about is a type of rain where there's kind of a misting all day, or kind of a light showers all day?
Yeah, I would say, I mean, it varies. So it can mist all day. There's times where it's just a steady drizzle, and then there's times where it's an intense downpour, and that happens for long periods of time. This rainstorms that we get here with the thunder and the lightning are not very common over there. Which was different growing up, in the Midwest. We have thunderstorms all the time and tornadoes, and so it was weird at first to know it was going to rain and not have a storm associated with that. Yeah.
So interesting.
It is.
So you mentioned that you were teaching there
Yes.
for 3 years.
Yes.
And then you also mentioned, you kind of hinted at, you mentioned about the different regions of Spain, and I'm going to touch on that a little bit later. But
Okay.
you were teaching there for 3 years. So from that experience, what was your sense that the students were getting from you and your presence in the classroom? And what was your sense of, like, what did you get from that experience and from the students and that
Yeah.
interaction?
Yeah, I like that question a lot. Well, first, the school I was in, you get assigned to a school, and so I was assigned to this tiny little school in this rural village, about an hour or so from where I lived. And it was an elementary school, so they had 3-year-olds all the way up to 12, and grades for each. And I would say the average class size was about 10, maybe. Some classes only had 4 students, and some had maybe 12 students. So it was a little bit smaller. And this particular school was the first time they ever had a language assistant. And so it was a big learning experience for both of us, because I hadn't taught English before. And so we were constantly trying to figure out, okay, what could my role be? How could I be of assistance and aid, while still also getting cultural experience from them? And so I think from the student's perspective, it was just eye-opening to meet somebody who spoke a different language from you. For most of the students there, many of them didn't speak Spanish. They only spoke Galician. And so hearing somebody speak English was a new experience for them, and the different, the accent. And I think the other thing for them that was a big change was that the English that they were learning was from Britain and not the US. And so having that cultural difference in those words that I would use and wouldn't be in their book, helped them. But then I think the other aspect for them was just having an opportunity to practice their language speaking skills with somebody who's a native speaker was just eye-opening for them. For me, a big change was I'm from Chicago, so big city, there's always something happening. And so going to a smaller town where there's not as much happening and there's not as many people was a change. Yeah, it was interesting to be like walking down the street and there's like a cow right next to you or chickens crossing the road. That was a new experience for me, and it was cool. I just was like, oh my gosh, you're right there. You're not in a fence somewhere. And then just learning Galician. With the students, I would only speak English, but then during staff development time, I told all the staff, I was like, I don't want you to speak in English or Spanish with me. I want to learn Galician. And so I learned Galician through immersion, which was eye-opening, that you could learn a language and not know anything about it and just be surrounded and pick up on things. And the students found it very funny the days I would pop into their class and sit down with them during their Galician language hour, and I'd sit there and I'd write and do the homework with them, and they were very just like, what are you doing? I'm like, I'm learning with you. So just kind of making that connection of peer-to-peer learning was also fun.
Nice.
Yeah.
So as you describe it, I'm not getting a sense that you felt overly isolated, like you continue to be connected, or were there experiences where you were feeling kind of disconnected?
There were definitely moments where I went through that cultural exchange or cultural shock experience of feeling alone and misunderstood, and almost maybe judged. And I think one particular moment was, so I didn't have a car when I was there. I took public transportation. So the bus that took me from my city where I lived to the town where the school was, I would take it every day, and I had to hope that the bus was on time, because if it was a few minutes late, my coworker would leave me there, and I just had to figure out how to get to the school. And so that particular day, we were late by a minute, and so she had left, and so I had to get a taxi. And for me, like growing up, like I learned that you take the taxi in the back seat. Like if you're a passenger, you're in the back seat. And I remember getting into school, and the students were all getting out of the bus, and the faculty were there waiting, and they kind of like looked at me, and I was like, I'm getting out, and I walked past one. She's like, she's from Carunia. That's why it's weird. They must ride in the back seat there. And it wasn't until I realized, like, in that part of Spain, you ride in the front seat if you're in a taxi by yourself. And I just was like, this huge cultural, like, faux pas that I made. And yeah, it just was an interesting experience. But I think in terms of isolation, the first few months I was there was probably one of the harder ones. I didn't have a whole lot of friends. I had arrived late on the program, so like all the other peers on my cohort had connections. They built connections. My coworkers at the school were really helpful, but they all lived in town, and I lived in a different city. So it took a while to make friends. But then it was fine, and the school I was at was just, they were really warm and welcoming and went above and beyond. And I think that was also something, a few years later, I had switched schools and was in a city, and just the cultural differences between a rural town and a city were evident in the fact that, you know, for this smaller town, they wanted you to feel at home and part of the community, and really went above and beyond to make sure that I knew I was part of them. Whereas in the city, I was just another colleague, and so you talk with them, you get to know with them, but that's it. Like, I'll see you later, and so at those times I felt really isolated, and it was hard. But you learn to work through those, and yeah. Yes.
Great.
Yes.
No, I'm always interested in when you're talking about that experience, like in the office.
Yeah.
About, you know, being in another place.
Yeah.
So I know that you brought, I think there's a particular type of jewelry you have with you,
Yes.
and then some other materials. So you want to talk about that a bit?
Yeah. So Galicia is very unique. I would say in much of Spain, you have the north and you have the south, and just the cultural differences are very obvious between the food, the people, the music. In the north, they use they have a lot of Celtic influences, and so you see a lot of the festivals with bagpipes and the traditional plaid, and a lot more dancing with the feet. So that is neat. But then, because there's so much Celtic influence, they have what are called megas, which means witch or wizard in the Galician language. And so they're always talking about the megas. The megas are going to come get you, or there's going to be bad things, and it's the megas' fault. And so there are these necklaces that they have, and you see the Galician symbols. They're all over the region. And they each are a pendant to protect you against something. And so this particular company, it's called Sargadelos, makes them. And each symbol protects you against something specific. And so this one that I was gifted was just a general protection of, like, just protect you from evil spirits and the megas in general. But some people will wear them specifically to protect you against the water spirits or the land witches, or just different things. So that was neat. And as you can see, the red, the white, and the blue are the common colors that they use over there. And you'll see a lot of blue in the buildings or in the traditional dress. And I don't know specifically why blue. My guess is it has something to do with the ocean. You're right along the Atlantic Ocean, and a lot of their customs and traditions revolve around the ocean. And then, as I mentioned, they speak Galician, which is a combination or a mix of the Spanish language and the Portuguese language. And so you can see similar grammar, similar words and structure used. But there are words that differ. And this particular word, it's marinha, and it's a word that we don't have in English, and I don't know that too many cultures have that. It's similar to feeling homesick, but goes a level beyond, and it's not just that you're homesick. You're you're sick for your land, you miss your culture, you miss your people. And so it encompasses all of those elements that we think of when we think of culture, but then really ties into, I miss the physical land I live on. And so you'll hear this a lot when people leave for a few years, or maybe they go study abroad, that they have a lot of Mariña, and they're anxious to come back home. So, yeah.
That is so interesting, and thanks for putting that in the parts of speech, so that we know how it is. Like you
Yes.
something you have a lot of, right?
Yes,
okay.
yes. You have Mariña. You aren't Mariña. You have it, which is a whole different conversation when you think about language. In some cultures, where an emotion is something you have and not something that defines you. So that's also fascinating.
Yeah.
Yes.
I mean, I feel like there's a lot of material. We could have like a series, like a five-part series here. Is there anything that you want to say before we go? If you could even say something in
Galician
Spanish or
in
Galician,
Spanish.
although no pressure to do so.
Yeah, I'll talk. I love food, so I'll talk a little bit about the food, and then I can end with something in Galician. So your typical Spanish food is tapas, or little plates. And part of that really comes from the Spaniards are very social. Everything they do, they're with people. They want to hear how the day is going. And so it's common after work, everyone gets together and you grab a drink. And when you get a drink, usually it comes with a small little dish of meat or cheese or a different type of food. And you just catch up and chat with people. One of those tapas that is very common is called tortilla. And it's not what you're thinking of when you think of a tortilla from Mexico. This one is made with eggs, potatoes, salt, and olive oil. And you would chop up the potatoes and fry them, and then mix the eggs and fry all together, kind of like an omelet. There are lots of debates in Spain, lots of controversial opinions, and one of the most common one is about tortilla. Do you put onion in it or not? I personally love it with onion, but I will eat it without onion. But there are many people who will argue, oh no, onion should not be in there, and so that's just a fun debate. And then you look at the different styles and how it's cooked. Sometimes it's cooked firmly, like fully cooked, and so you'd eat that as a sandwich, whereas other regions, it's more juicy, or not raw, but creamy. And there's a particular city in Galicia called Betanzos, where they have a competition every year, and they have a specific style of tortilla, and you put it on a hot pan, you wait 20 seconds and you flip it, and then you cut it, and it just oozes everywhere. And the first time I was being told this, I was like, it doesn't sound great, but it's delicious. It's fantastic. So tortilla has a special place in my heart. I will eat it when I'm happy, sad, upset, anything. So yes, come eat tortilla. Talk to me about tortilla. I love tortilla. And yeah, something in Galician. Oof. A common phrase is hecho que hay, and it comes to the phrase of it is what it is. It'll be what it'll be. Don't worry about it. So you'll hear that a lot in Galicia. Another common thing, and this is similar, has Spanish roots, but you'll hear a lot of depende. You'll ask a question, and this is how you know someone's from Galicia if they respond with depende. They're not firm. They don't say yes or no and make plans. Nothing is confirmed. It's always, it depends, maybe. I don't know. We'll find out. So for someone who likes to have concrete things, that was an adjustment. But
Perfect.
yes.
Thank you so much, Elizabeth. I feel like we've had a pretty wide range of topics that we've touched on. And again, there's a lot of potential for more. But thank you so much. Everyone, this has been another edition of Going Live with Global Learning.